The advent of moving pictures, roughly about 100 years ago now, opened a whole new genre of human communication for art, for entertainment, for education, and more recently, instances of social dialogue. The documentary Crossing Arizona premiered at the Sundance Film Festival in 2006. And is it ever a social dialogue? If you haven't seen it, I know you've heard about it. And the brilliant young director-producer of that documentary is joining us today. He can tell us how we got to where we are now in the immigration confrontation and how immigration truly affects us all. Please welcome DanDeVivo.
Hey, how's everybody doing? We're going to start off with a clip from the film that we made between the years of 2004 and 2006. It premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. If you want to learn more information about it, definitely just give us a Google, Crossing Arizona. Let's start with the clip.
Do you have any idea what it took that person to get there to fix your breakfast, to make your bed, to mow your lawn, to take care of your kids? Do you have any idea the suffering they went through, the money they had to spend, the families that they left?
There are many, many people who feel that anything that happens to you if you're crossing a border illegally, you deserve. If you're going to die of thirst, good, you deserve to die of thirst. I mean, I don't believe in the death penalty for anything, so I certainly don't believe in the death penalty for trying to walk across the desert to look for a better life for your family. It had been about 120 or 115 every day for the few days before. What we think is that he probably didn't die right here, but very often if people die off the road, even a quarter of a mile, their friends will bring the body to the road. It was just lying there with lots of scratches and bloody marks on him from the catclaw thorns. I lived less than a quarter of a mile, just barely down the road, which is one of the reasons it seems so terrible, because certainly water would have taken care of it, and he didn't have it.
This is about where she was at, right here in the bottom of this ditch, where they found her, right in here. And what had happened, a lot of the varmints had ate part of her, and so they scattered the bones around a little bit. And so they had to come in and gather everything up. But it was just below this wire right there is where it was at. I found 5 people that have died on this ranch in the last 5 years. I never found anybody before this all started about 5 or 6 years ago.
Over the last 3 years, I've recovered personally probably over 60 bodies along the Arizona-Mexico border. And to recover a body, you know, it's not like people see in the movies. In the movies, you see somebody die, it looks like they're asleep. You don't smell the blood. You don't smell the body. You don't smell the urine where they probably urinated themselves or defecated themselves. It's TV, and we become anesthetized to that, all right? When you recover these bodies, sometimes, in a lot of cases, they've been down about 2 months, which means they started to decompose, which means the bodies are bloated. And what happens is when you go to recover the bodies, you go to grab an arm or a leg, the arm or leg comes off in your hand like a leg of chicken, as blunt as I can put it.
131, if you can 1022.
It changes you. You never get used to recovering a body in the desert, ever.
1748.
I recovered the body of a 28-year-old female 4 months ago, just west of here, who was 8 months pregnant. She couldn't keep up. The coyote left her to die. That still bothers me to this day, because the coyote left her.
It's not a very happy scene, but thank you for allowing this to be shown here, and thank you for watching it. What I wanted to say was that we have a problem, you know. It's hard to say exactly when it started, but basically it started with a lie. You know, U.S. politicians made promises they could never keep in 1993, and they began to militarize our border with Mexico. And people have been dying ever since. It was a calculated move. You know, aggressive enforcement tactics near urban centers like San Diego and El Paso, direct migrant traffic out of sight and into more rural patches where the desert, they actually calculated, would serve as a deterrent. The fencing that the U.S. builds along its southern border is a testament to the inefficiency of our current immigration policy. The government is spending billions to build walls, erect lighting, install electronic sensors and cameras. We even sent the National Guard down there. Since 1993, we have tripled the size of our Border Patrol and quintupled the border enforcement spending to $3.8 billion a year with absolutely no result. Before there was walls, there was circularity. You know, people would come and go. Now, it's so difficult to cross the border and it costs $2,000 and you have to risk your life that people who come and make it here, they choose to stay and they send for their wives and their children, and increasingly those are the bodies we're finding in the desert. So let's be clear. Walls are not keeping people out, they're trapping people in. So many problems arise as a result of border enforcement. You know, human smuggling is only one part of the growing shadow economy. Ranchers contend with cut fences and trash, you know, and they deal with trash on their property, and citizens are subject to racial profiling and harassment. The environmental damage is terrible. And none of it would be an issue if we just decriminalized entry. Sooner or later, we've got to own up to the fact that enforcement-only approach won't work. And it's claimed more than 4,000 lives since 1994. More people have died attempting to cross the U.S.-Mexico border in the past decade than happened on 9/11. More people die in 1 year along this border than in the entire 28-year history of the Berlin Wall. Now, I don't think anybody here wants migrants to die, but maybe you think that a migrant's death is a price worth paying for protecting our borders. Now, that's pretty cynical, but how else can we explain the public's indifference to the situation? Why do public officials remain insistent on border controls when they fail to produce any desirable result? It doesn't seem right. There should be outrage each time a migrant dies. Instead, because people are misled about their economic fate in this new age of globalization or distracted by the post-9/11 war on terror, immigrants quickly get perceived as law-breaking interlopers. But, you know, this is emotional. It's not logical. So while it's important to listen to arguments, we have to help people separate their fears from reality. So when people say things like, immigrants are coming and they're stealing our jobs, we have to ask them, well, that's interesting. You know, why don't the unemployment statistics in this country for the past decade support that claim? And why didn't men lose jobs when women entered the workforce in 1941? It's because there's not a fixed amount of jobs in this economy. It doesn't work that way. In fact, more workers create more jobs. You know, just as an example, when a construction worker comes here and works in that industry, they have to buy supplies to build the things that they need to build. They also just spend their wages. This increases the demand for the people who produce the things that they consume, more jobs. So people come up with all sorts of reasons to hate on immigrants. But in reality, we ought to see migration not as a threat, but as an opportunity. Now, I don't have to tell people of Houston how much immigrant community here contributes to the growth. And it's not because labor is cheap, but it's because people here add to the overall productivity of the region. The public would reap more benefits if the labor were legalized. Globalization has made it possible for goods, services, and capital to move all over the world with fewer restrictions. And the world economy has boomed to 5 times what it was in 1950. Freedom of movement has always brought growth. It's counterproductive to restrict the movement of people. Because we're the most important part of the puzzle. The explosive economic growth we achieved between 1870 and 1920 coincided with the highest levels of immigration from Europe. The World Bank projects that we'd be $356 billion a year better off if rich countries allowed workers from developing countries to enter our workforce between now and 2025. It's not just the rich countries who would benefit either. It's huge for the migrants and for the countries that they came from. Consider the remittances that workers send home. It's difficult to get the exact figures here, but evidence suggests it's about $480 billion a year. This is 3 times greater than the $166 billion brought in by foreign direct investment. It's also 6 times the official government aid that rich countries send to poorer nations. And remittances, they go exactly to the people who need it. They help pay for things like, water, clean water, education, health care, and they help start up new businesses. Now, if you believe the world is an unequal place and that rich people should do more to help poor people, it's a huge oversight to ignore the benefits of migration. Freer international migration is an ideal way to combat global poverty. And look, migration, it's inevitable. As businesses and goods and services move the world, searching out new markets, so do workers. This is not scary. Bankers and employees of other multinationals do it all the time. We should be open to this change because growth in the 21st century will require even greater movement of people across borders. The sooner we get used to this idea, the better off we'll be. So let's be pragmatic about preparing ourselves by investing in our resources wisely. We should be funding and transforming education to remain competitive in the global economy. Instead, we're waging war for oil and fencing ourselves in. This creates tension, and it is a drag on progress. To maintain the status quo is not just stupid and callous, but lazy. It's not in our best interest for people to die, and it's a tragic waste of talent. We're going to look at another clip from the film.
The desert is a brutal place to be in the summertime. And that's what we're trying to do, is keep them alive and not have any more deaths on the desert. We've had, about 300 last year?
205.
205 last year.
Where we operate the water stations, there are fewer deaths than there are in other locations. We would like to double or triple the number of water stations that we have out here. And of course, without any question, we would love to be able to deploy water along the Baba-Kivri Trail across the Tohono Indian Nation, which is the deadliest migrant trail in the United States.
It's 12:07 and it's probably about 95 degrees. Probably by 2 o'clock it'll be 103, 104. Buenos días.
Buenos días.
¿Cómo estás? ¿Tienes agua?
Casi no.
¿Necesitas más?
No, pues donde sea. No sé ni dónde estoy, no sé ni qué.
Ah, ok.
Ni qué hacer, ni nada.
¿Tienes comida? Tampoco.
Yo me quedé abajo de uno de esos árboles. Pues ya luego no encontré a nadie, no vi a nadie. Y me vine caminando y vine a dar este camino.
Okay.
Ya me salí aquí, dije aquí, vi la rodada de los carros.
Ajá. Lo que puedes hacer, yo no te puedo llevar, porque si la migra pasa y te ves en el troque, posiblemente que voy a tener como de prisionero, y por eso no te puedo llevar. Okay. La única cosa es te puedo dar agua y información. ¿Cuántos más que pasaron?
Pues andábamos como 30.
30, ok. ¿Y ellos se siguieron?
Pues los correteó la migra.
Aparece. El problema es tratando de llegar aquí, este punto, hasta Phoenix.
Y para llegar allá a Phoenix, ¿qué tanto es? ¿Qué tanto de...?
¿Millas o días?
Tiempo, o sea, horas.
Días, mano, días.
No, entonces no.
Y por eso lo que recomiendo es que sigas caminando hasta la carretera.
Mejor.
Y ahí la migra te van a pasar y solamente dice, quiero voluntariamente. Eso es mejor que quedar aquí, sin saber dónde está, sin agua, sin comida, sin compañeros, sin el coyote. Lo único que puedo hacer es darte poco comida que tengo y suficiente agua. Vamos por este lado, por allá. ¿Y por cuántos días te han caminado?
2 días.
Los pocos que tengo de comida. Te llevo ese plástico y te dejo.
Vine, quería yo trabajar. Van a operar a mi señora. No tengo dinero y me dijeron que viniera yo a trabajar.
¿Y de dónde vienes?
De Hidalgo. No tengo niños chiquitos. De morirme por ahí, pues no me da miedo a morir, pero pues mis hijos.
Para nosotros todos, para los hijos. Pues, mano.
Por me regreso para allá. Sí.
Si sigue caminando, yo voy a pasar por aquí cuando dejo estas aguas en 1 hora y media. Pero van a pasar la mira y no tienen miedo de ellos, porque ellos ya saben que todos que están tratando de buscar trabajo. Y a ver qué pasa. Mano, que te vaya con Dios.
Gracias, muchas gracias.
His wife needs an operation and he has children. And he came north looking for work. He paid 13,000 pesos. I don't know how much that is now. American dollars. I think that's probably about $1,300 to get this far, to get separated like that. So the best thing for him is to walk out to the highway and turn himself into the Border Patrol.
So we don't really know what happened to that guy, but we pretty much assume that he followed Mike's advice. This was one of our first encounters when we started making the film, and it really had a big impact on us because for the first time we could see the human consequence of a failed policy. At that time, Arizonans were really feeling the pinch from a federal enforcement strategy that was funneling traffic into the state. And, the annual body count was over 300 a year at that time. And I wish I could tell you that things have improved since then, but they haven't. Deaths have stayed consistently high, and anti-immigrant sentiment has flared. Recently, Arizonans have voted to pass a series of virulent laws that combine to deny undocumented workers the right to collect damages if they are injured on the job. And they declare English as the official language and at the same time refuse adult education classes that teach people ESL. The DREAM Act has failed. That would have allowed children of undocumented workers the right to in-state college tuition. And most recently, the governor has allowed a workplace enforcement law that revokes businesses' owners' licenses if they're found to employ undocumented workers. All of this is part of a new phenomenon we are seeing across the country where states are empowering themselves to enforce laws that are usually reserved for the federal government. Now, I think that there's a real lack of leadership in D.C., and I think a lot of other people do, and that's why you see this happening. It seems that both the Democrats and the Republicans are more interested in prolonging the debate than actually, making reform. And that's not right, especially when the stakes are so high. In Arizona, as a result of the sanctions law, people are fleeing Arizona. They're fleeing. The Chronicle reports that many are coming to Houston, and Arizona businesses have closed down. It's early, but already we can see in December that Arizona's tax intake dropped 84 million. It's going to have an impact. If these new laws and the federal government's plan to build 700 miles of additional border fencing are any indication of the road we're on, it looks like things are going to get much worse before they can get any better. It's a shame to think that we have to seal the border before improving the lives of people living inside them. And if our conscience doesn't persuade us to change our course, then at least our self-interest ought to. By trying to protect society from the perceived threat of immigration, we're actually harming ourselves, stunting our economy and personal freedoms as we foster injustice and actually criminality. As long as there is work to be done in rich countries for wages many times higher than poor ones, migration will continue to occur. I think that our borders should be more open, fewer walls and more toll booths, less border patrol chasing folks all over the desert, and more naturalization officers helping folks to be here legally. And there shouldn't be penalties for this. It's the system that needs fixing. One of my favorite quotes comes from a British economist, journalist, and author, Philip Lagrange. He explains, allowing people to move freely may seem unrealistic, but then so too once did abolishing slavery or giving women the vote. Campaigning for open borders, I think, is a noble cause for our time. Ultimately, for the outcome to be positive, we must nurture tolerance and learn to embrace change. Then someday, our offspring will understand migration as an acceptable consequence of a global economy that shrinks the distances between people, enabling us to a future of shared wealth and inclusion. Aware of hardship that greed and elitism create, a wise and revered voice assures me, when the storm calms, when the rain and fire leave in peace, the world will no longer be the world, but something better. Thank you.